This episode is sponsored by our friend Snugplug. You know I don't do many sponsorships, so when I do, you know that I believe in the product. We all face outlets sometimes that have loose connection. They just fall out. When you're doing your vacuuming or you're trying to charge your phone, it just falls right out of the wall. Well, now with Snugplug, you don't need to worry about that anymore. You just insert that and it'll be nice and snug. A wonderful invention that I think you should get as well. And you can support us here at the podcast by going to the affiliate link and getting yourself a Snugplug. A big thank you to our sponsor, iFixit, who fights for your right to repair and makes really cool tools in the process. If you need to fix your phone, laptop, or even a vacuum, iFixit has thousands of parts, tools, and free guides.
Mercury, Mercury Stardust. She's a beacon of hope in the darkest night. Mercury, Mercury Stardust. She'll teach you how to make it all alright.
Hey there, hi, my name is Mercury, and I'm the trans handyman. My pronouns are she, her, and I teach compassionate DIY. We're here to help renters, LGBTQIA members, and anyone who's feeling left out in a DIY space. Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals! Thank you for listening to this episode of the Handy Ma'am Hotline. I am, as always, joined by Maggie Conrad! It's worth it. It's just hang in there.
I've
Worth
learned
it.
to just wait.
Yeah, just let it happen, Maggie. Does it picture us being in 1994?
What is this sound in my ears?
It's worth it. Maggie, just sit down and watch the TV. Maggie, you are on the big screen of life, Maggie. We are so excited to have you here every single week. It's so
I've not heard that
audience.
sound in so long.
I want you to know that I feel like this is the worst way to introduce the podcast every single week, because at this point, people who are listening for the first time have no idea what's happening. They have like if this is
They're not in on the inside joke yet.
If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, this bit has been going on for like the 4 or 5 months we've done this podcast. It has progressively gotten more and more insane.
Yeah, it really has.
Last week we launched Maggie into space for some reason.
I'm just waiting for a countdown.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. But that all being said, Maggie, are you having a good week?
I am. Yeah, how are you?
I'm having a really good week. By the time that everyone is listening to this podcast, we will be starting. Because this is coming out the Thursday of the day we're starting the wonderful $1 million live stream for 30 straight hours. But today, if you're listening to this on Thursday, today at 4 p.m. Central Time, I'm starting the 30-hour live stream with my very good friend Jory, Luring Skull, on TikTok. And we're going to be on TikTok Live for 30 straight hours. We're also going to be on Instagram Live as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to help and support us, please watch the live stream. Tell your friends about it. We are probably already at like $200,000 by the time that you are listening to this. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more. But we are going the rest of the way by 10 p.m. Central Time on Friday night. We're hoping to have $1 million raised for trans healthcare by trans people for trans people through the wonderful organization of Point of Pride. So hopefully we'll be good to go. And next week's episode will be the best of Mercury Stardust, the Handyman Hotline. So I can take a fucking break.
The hot ma'am handy line.
The hot ma'am handy line. God, this show always off to a rip-roaring good time when we start the podcast. All right, Maggie, that all being said, now that we've done all the cleaning in the household and organized the boxes, are you ready for the first question of the day?
Let's roll it.
Let's roll it!
Hi, my name is Morgan. My pronouns are she, her. I am living in a family member's old house that they are not in anymore, and we've been doing some repairs here and there, but the electricity in the kitchen went out a few years ago, we were told, and so there's nothing that we can use in there. The dishwasher still worked. It did stop working, and then now the oven and stove work, but went out for a little bit and then came back on, kind of reset itself. And then the refrigerator is not running very well. And so all of that is in the kitchen, but like plugs, outlets, things like that we can't use in there. And then recently there's been some mold in the bottom cabinets and in a few of the top cabinets, and we can't figure out where it's coming from or what to do. We're in a rural area where there's not a lot of people that will come out to our home, and the few people that we have called, they just haven't shown up to get quotes or anything or find out. So we're kind of winging it and trying to figure it out on our own. But in the meantime, it's ruined like all of our dishes and so much stuff that we had in the cabinets. And now we're no longer able to use the cabinets. So this is something that I am so confused about. I don't know where the mold is coming from. And then there is a bathroom on the opposite wall of where these cabinets are. And the bathroom cabinet there under that sink is completely filled with mold as well. So if there's any info what you think this could be, I would love to hear that. And then I guess I'm kind of like, do we rip the cabinets out and throw them away? I am scared to start ripping things out and then need to gut the whole thing. We just can't, we can't do that. We don't know how to do anything and we don't really have the money. So if there's like an easy fix or maybe just someone knows about where the mold might be coming from, that would be great. Anyway, I love listening to your podcast and all the videos and all the posts and everything. Thank you so much for being a light in the LGBTQ community. I know we all love you so much and can't wait to hear the next episode. Thanks so much. Bye.
This question requires a lot of answers. So I actually called Morgan directly to make sure that we could solve this a little bit more effectively. So roll the tape, maestro. By maestro, I mean my best friend, Matthew. Okay, could you describe again what is happening? We'll go kind of step by step and see if we can help you.
Yeah. So, and it's not just the kitchen, but that was kind of the main issue. We're in my mom's old house. So she hadn't lived here for a few years before we moved in. And she's a single mom. She didn't have a lot of time to do the maintenance on the home and kind of keep it up when she wasn't here. So when we moved in, there's some mold and stuff, and we tried to treat different areas. But as we've been here, this has gotten worse and worse, and we don't know what to do. So there's mold in the kitchen on the bottom cabinet where it has taken over like the whole thing. I don't know where it's coming from, and it's also in the upper cabinets on one of the walls. There's nothing, like there's no visible leak or anything. I don't see any holes or anything like that.
So we'll tackle the mold a little bit. There's other issues going on other than the mold, correct? You called about something else. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let's
the
wonderful electrical party. Okay. So we'll talk about the mold. So unfortunately, a lot of the stuff you're describing is pretty bad damage. When mold gets into, even if this is old damage, right? Mold will grow on itself. Like it will expand. It will, try to get worse as it's going along, right? When you press on the walls, are they soft or what I would describe as kind of gummy at all?
Let me go do that because I don't think I've ever done that. I will say also in there above the stove there is like a metal plate, like a splash, like behind the stove top. And there's mold coming out from behind that, and there's mold coming out of one of the outlets too. The wall does not feel soft. No,
they feel solid. Okay, that's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
That means that it's not like an active leak, probably. But it does still means that you're still having issues with mold growth. So the thing that I will say that you would want to start doing is probably grabbing a dehumidifier, and not just any dehumidifier, like a pretty decent one. They usually range between $85 to $150. You can get a pretty decent one, but that dehumidifier is going to stop the growth of the mold and help to prevent it from continuing, okay? while that's happening, you can spray the mold itself with some type of mold killer. There's a product literally called mold killer that I really recommend. But whatever you do, don't use bleach.
Okay.
Bleach just cleans the
Okay.
surface. It doesn't actually like kill the the mold itself. Okay. So whatever you do,
Okay.
shoot it with some wonderful mold killer. Let it soak for like 15 minutes. Then you have a rag with some dish soap and some vinegar in it, like a 50-50 solution. And then you can scrape that away and kind
Okay.
of like rub it in, and that should solve a lot of the problem. Okay. Now, you're going to want to do that 2 to 3 times a
Okay.
week, even if you don't see it. Like once you wipe it away, you're still going to want to do that 2 to 3 times a week for about 3 weeks. And while the dehumidifier is
Okay.
going, that should help the growth of the mold. When you're wiping it away, I would say you're probably going to want either a mask on or a respirator. Definitely wear gloves and those kind of things, Morgan. But that's where I would start.
Okay.
That is the first solution. That is like the lowest cost of the options. If this progresses, which I think it
Okay.
might, then we're talking about like you'll need to rip out the cabinets and rip out the drywall and actually put in new ones. That's the only way you're gonna fully get rid of the problem. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what
I
I
know,
was
I know. It's
hoping not
never
to
a
have to
fun
do.
thing to hear, like oh the worst case scenario. But the
Yeah.
thing is, the mitigation of the mold could be enough. It really could be. If if you feel like this solves a problem for like 3 or 4 months, but then it kind of slowly comes back, another thing you could do is put like a lacquer on a mold resistant lacquer. Like there's a product called Kills, that's KILLZ, that has a really good mold
Okay.
resistant lacquer that can go on top of it, and then you can paint on top of that too. Okay. That will help to
Okay.
resist the mold a little longer and keep the mold from coming into the air, right? Because that's the biggest fear is getting mold into
Okay.
our lungs, right? So if we can put lacquer on it,
Yeah.
it's going to seal it into the wall more. Now, if you're getting it around or on your electrical outlets, I would recommend replacing the covers of your electrical outlets and stuff like that and getting all new ones.
Okay.
But I think that should help with the mold for the most part. The electrical problem, I would like to kind of dive into that because I just did some of this down in Topeka when I was down there helping our friend Luke. So walk me through what's happening with electrical real quick.
So I don't know too much. We moved in at the end of 2020, but my mom had not lived here for like 3 years before that, and she said it stopped working while she was still here. And it just, you can turn the lights on in the kitchen, and the dishwasher was working until last year it died. The stove did stop working for a little bit, for like a couple days, and then it came back on, like it reset itself. It's now um, in like a different language or something, which is fine. We just use it as is, but you cannot use the outlets in the kitchen. But directly outside of the kitchen and on the other wall, the outlets are fine.
Okay.
So I have
Yeah,
no
so
idea.
there's a lot that could be going on here. I'm going to tell you kind of the things that this usually entails, and maybe we'll find a solution here, okay? So, typically when you have
Okay.
outlets in a kitchen, they're the ones like you'll have a kitchen have two different fuses. Like they are your kitchen is a workhorse in the house. So, it holds the most ampage, it holds the most voltage in it. So it's going to typically be the space that has split outlets. Like kitchens don't typically share outlets with anywhere else in the whole house when it comes to what's an electrical breaker. Now, if
Okay.
like depending on how old the house is and when the last time the outlets were updated, you could have a short in one of the outlets, and if they're all wired in a series, like not all homes are wired the same, but if they're wired in a series, which means one outlet is wired to the next outlet, which is wired to the next outlet, which is wired to the next outlet. If one outlet in the series before it gets to any of the other ones is out, then none of the other ones are going to work. Okay? So what you
Okay.
could have is that you could have one outlet that is damaged that is not allowing electricity to any of the other ones. Okay? Now, the way you fix that is you replace the outlets. Now, I don't know how comfortable you are with any of that, but replacing outlets is fairly straightforward. But I would definitely not do it if you don't feel comfortable. Okay. You want to make sure the electricity
Okay.
is out. They make outlet testers. These little plugs that go into the outlet that light up that let you know if it's good or bad. Like if it's red, there's no power coming to it. If it's green, it means that it's definitely getting power, but I wouldn't touch it. You know, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So if you're reading red on those outlet testers, you're typically safe to go and try to solve the problem of just taking the outlet out and putting a new outlet in. But if you do that, I would recommend getting yourself commercial grade or industrial grade rather outlets. Get ones that are a little bit tougher. They're going to handle a lot more, wear and tear. Okay. If that's
Okay.
not the solution, because you talked about the dishwasher, you talked about the
Mm.
oven, and all of those should be on a separate breaker. All that should be on its own little breaker. You could have a problem where your breakers in your breaker box are going bad. That would require an electrician. I wouldn't recommend doing that yourself. And in many states, you're not allowed to do that.
Okay.
So I would say that try the outlets. Like really get yourself an outlet tester and see if, oh wow, there's actually no power coming to these. That means that there must be something going on with the series. We'll give that a try, and if that doesn't work, then you're still not getting power, but it's coming from the breaker more than likely. Does that all make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
those are the two.
Okay. That gives us a
Yeah,
starting
yeah,
point
and at
to
least
try
the
to figure it
outlet is
out.
like
Yeah.
fairly affordable and it's fairly accessible. Like if you get hung up on the safety
Okay.
factor, there are so many good tutorials online. Ironically, we're having my company is putting on a YouTube video very soon, either this week or next week, that's going to show you how to replace an outlet. So this is kind of like very fortunate. But there are
Yeah.
other amazing videos on the good old fashioned tube of the U that will be able to help show you step by step how to do it and make you feel safe along the way. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for calling. And I hope that you are having a good day. And give my love to all the kiddos that are running around in the background. Okay.
I will.
Yeah, no
Thank you
problem.
so
Take
much.
care, Morgan. You too.
Have
Bye
a
bye.
great day.
Okay, we have a question from Samantha in Florida. My name is Samantha and I live in Florida, and my neighbors have been making offhanded comments to me every time I leave my apartment. Do you have any tips or tricks on security bolts or cameras that could be useful in protecting a Florida queer from the Ron DeSantis crowd? I have a Ring doorbell, but that doesn't seem to be enough.
Whenever we get questions like this, it's always really scary to me. I feel like, this is why I love that this podcast exists, because when people ask me why I have to be called the trans handyman,
Yeah.
this is why. Because like the fact that queer people and people who are marginalized feel scared in their own home for just
Mhm.
existing as they are says a lot about our current states of politics, but also says a lot about like our society.
Yeah.
And the fact when people have the audacity to ask me why I feel like I need to call myself the trans handyman, why do you have the audacity to even care?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about safety, there's some things we're going to talk about right off the bat. But I'm going to say my favorite one I always bring up is the Addalock.
Mm-hmm.
The Addalock is spelled ADDA lock. It is, I don't get the knockoffs. Do not get the knockoffs. And the reason why I say that is because, yeah, they're cheaper, but you save like $2-3 maybe. But a lot of the reason why they're able to make it for cheaper is because the designs are usually largely plastic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to protect you like the all metal but plastic coated Addalock. So highly recommend getting the Adalock. It's about 15 to 20 bucks. I definitely think you should get two. And you can use this not in just your apartment or your house. You can use this in, when you're traveling in hotels or motels or when you are living in the dorms. It's just a really handy tool to have around. But basically, the way that this works is it fits inside of your strike plate. You close the door like you normally would, and then a piece of it slides down and then prevents it from opening. If it's a swing in door, it will
Mm-hmm.
prevent it from being a problem. Okay. Now, if you're a renter, you typically can't add deadbolts or
Yeah.
other things like that, right? And if you have a swinging outdoor, you have less options. We've talked about many different devices over the time of this podcast. I highly recommend listening to some other episodes that we have definitely covered,
Yeah.
some renter safety issues as well. But my last thing I'll say here is the question we always answer with is the cameras. Maggie, what are the cameras we use in our studio?
We use the Google Nest cameras, and those can be outdoor or indoor. And I highly recommend having those in addition to your doorbell, because then, like anybody inside, you can have that on camera as well.
Yeah, and it goes right to your phone and it saves to your phone, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I can see stuff in there and take care of it. And even if someone damaged it would still be I would still get the footage of it.
Yeah, and you would get and you should have this ability on your Ring camera too to get notified, obviously every time that the camera goes off when you're not there, and it'll turn off automatically when you're
Yeah.
home. And you have to get a monthly subscription in order to be able to get recording 24/7, and I think it goes back like 10 days.
What is the month? How much is it a month?
Oh, I don't remember. It's not that expensive. It's less than $50.
Okay, that could be a price prohibitive depending on
Yeah, they
where
have
someone is.
tiers,
Yeah,
to where at least it's a little bit cheaper, and I don't even
but
think it's
there's
50. I think it's like $30 or even 20.
there's other
I would
options
have
though.
yeah.
There's other options with devices like this. I just like this specific one because we've used it before, but
Yeah.
also I've seen how easy it is to install. It is like really easy to install. You have to charge it every 2 weeks or something.
Mhm.
But you just take it right off the magnetic pad. And I think the reason why I bring this up is because a lot of landlords will have it in their closet you can't use cameras. I think that's absurd, right?
Yeah.
And trust me, I cannot legally say you should do something illegal, right? But I will say this, that the fact that the camera itself can come off the wall effectively and easy enough to me would be a nice plus, right? And make sure that it's not necessarily something that's going to get you in trouble, but something that's going to make you feel safe inside your home when
Mhm.
you're in your home. I definitely think it's something to look into.
And I looked it up, and it's $20 a month for 10
Oh,
days of history.
see, that's a little bit more
Yeah.
a price of a Netflix subscription almost these days.
Mhm.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
Netflix is so expensive now.
Yeah.
But anyways, that all being said, I think that is the route I would go. And my heart goes out to you. It really does. I'm sorry that you find yourself feeling unsafe, and I'm sorry that you find yourself living in Florida. I hope that you are hanging in there
Yeah.
and that everything is good. Okay, now on to the next question.
Okay, we have Leslie. Hi, Mercury Trans Handyman Hotline. My name is Leslie, and I'm a single mom to my 16-year-old who is transgender. We are big fans of your Instagram because we learn a lot and we love your amazing laugh. My question to you is this. I live in an old home built in 1947, and my basement keeps flooding due to water coming in the walls. I know it's partially due to the huge silver maples in the backyard, which are getting removed soon. But everyone keeps telling me that it's probably due to my drain tiles. People have been scaring me regarding the cost to have this done. Will it really be thousands of dollars to fix a basement like mine? Some say $20,000. Every year I get rain in my basement, so I know I need to take care of this really soon. But can you help me figure out what to do or who to call? I live in Milwaukee. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work. And they sent a picture of their best buddy, Ridley. He's an 11-year-old kitty cat.
Oh my God, Ridley is so cute. By the way, that looks like a model photo that you sent us. Like,
Yeah,
look at
so
that,
cute.
those big eyes and everything. I just want everyone to know, if you want me to answer your question for sure, you put a fucking cat in the goddamn
People
text.
have been sending their kitties more. It's so
It
cute.
does. It does work. I will tell you, if I see an image in there, I'm much more likely to look. And also, I should say, I didn't say this at the top of the episode. Typically, I don't know the questions going in, but today I picked the questions because our wonderful friend to the podcast dash employee Basil wasn't able to actually pick the questions out today. But so I picked all the questions out,
Mhm.
and I picked out most of them were cat related. Okay. If you sent me a picture of a cat, you got your question answered today. But all that being said, let's talk about good old fashioned drainage when it comes to
Mhm.
homes. Okay. So these problems that we're having with foundations, Leslie brought up drain tiles. A lot of
Mhm.
people probably don't know what drain tiles are.
I did not before today either.
Yeah, drain tiles are essentially these porous pipes that go right alongside your foundation, and it helps with seepage and drainage, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they have to really, I mean, even retrofit drain tiles just don't really, or just not really that practical. You can
Mhm.
do them, but you have to dig up so much to be able to add them retrofit. They are innately expensive,
Yeah.
right? But there are other options than drain tiles. Like, drain tiles are not the end all be all of drain seepage issues, right?
Mhm.
So with a drain tile, you add in the pipes when you are adding in the foundation. And that helps to basically reduce the water that is being put into your basement and will prevent like cracks,
Mm.
will prevent weakening of the foundation, those kind of things. So it tends to be like something you don't see in older homes, but something you will see in homes built around the 90s and 80s, right?
Sure.
And now, of course. But okay, now let's talk about other alternatives to the Rutherford drain tiles. I'm happy you brought up the maple tree, because trees tend to also be a problem, right? For lots of reasons, but they can lead to bad foundation of our foundations being cracked. So having it removed might generally help the issue in a huge way, especially because I think it was more than one maple too. I think she said two maples or something, right? But all that being said, there are some options. And the first one I'm going to say right out of the gate is, if you don't have a sub pump, this is where we would want to get you a sub pump. I would assume as a 1946 house that you have a sub pump already going. But if you don't, or yours is not always functional, I would drop $300 on a new sump pump, especially because they might be loud and obnoxious and vibrating, and maybe they don't always work when you want them to, right?
Mhm.
Sump pumps are vital in Wisconsin. I feel like they are such a huge part of having a basement in a lot of Midwestern states. So I would definitely make sure you have yourself a sub pump. That's going to help a lot and prevent a larger issue. I would also say, no matter what we're talking about, a dehumidifier in your basement will also be nice. So even
Mhm.
though we were talking about mold earlier in the podcast, I think a dehumidifier would also be good to have around and could mitigate some of the dampness, some of the problems you might be having right now. That these solutions that I'm saying right now are a drop in the hat when it comes to financial ownership of a house, where replacing and doing a retrofit of your drain tiles will be, honestly, it will be expensive. That will
Yeah.
be, you said $20,000, and I'm going to break it to you that that's actually at the cheaper end. That is a low estimate. Depending on what your house is, it could be as high as 50 or 60,000.
Wow.
It's very expensive. I mean,
That's like half of a house right
yeah,
there.
these are expensive things. I mean, the people who are telling you that you need to do drain tiles, I feel like there's other options to do, right? So we mentioned the sub pump. We talked about dehumidifier. Let's talk about another one that I had to look this up to make sure that I was right when I said this, because I wasn't sure if these actually work or not. But drain spout extensions
Mhm.
do a wonderful job. And we found one that's online that's actually pretty affordable. It's $30. It's basically acting as a laning pad for your downspout, and it grabs the water, and then you can either have the ones that rest on the surface, or the ones you dig up a hole and then put the extension in the grass and then point it in what direction away from your foundation, 15 or 20 feet away from your foundation. And that can be
Yeah.
huge. Anytime you can prevent water from getting into the crevices of your foundation, into the
Mhm.
sides of your house, the better it's going to be. You want that water to go about 10 feet down. If you have a flat yard and your yard is very much like almost like curved towards you, you have to figure out ways to make sure it's not. We used to do something back on the farm called sandbagging, and you would just put a whole bunch of sandbags during
Mhm.
around your house, and that would help preventing some of the problem itself. Does it make it a perfect solution? Oh no, not by any means. But it's a more affordable route, and it can help prevent some of the foundation, so it's not seeping
Right.
completely into the side of your building. It's sleeping a little bit away. It's still not helping a tremendous amount, but it can be a little bit, right? Another solution that when Maggie was throwing out there before the podcast was a rain barrel. And
Mhm.
this is another like old fashioned farm mentality is that you go to the downspout and you can sometimes just cut off the downspout
Mhm.
and you put the rain barrel right underneath there. This can be anything. It could be a 50-gallon barrel, it can be an old trash can, whatever you want, but it has to collect the water.
And have a
And,
little filter on it usually.
and then you can use that water for gardening. You can use that water in any way you want. Or you can just take that water and then bring it somewhere else and put the water in wherever you want it, right? These solutions are really focused on the downspout. So if you don't have a cleared, gutters, or if your downspouts are, pretty beat up,
And if you have those trees, you might want like gutter guards.
yeah, oh, definitely gutter guards are something that I didn't even know existed up until a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, I never saw them because again, we grew up on a farm. We didn't fucking have anything like that. We just dealt with what we had. But if you have problems with cleaning your gutters, you can use PVC and shop vac and make
Mhm.
an extension and then clean them out that way and suck them all up that way. We did that years on property management. So I definitely think there's ways to clean it out, but definitely worth the trouble of cleaning out your gutters to prevent
Mhm.
this problem from worsening while you find a more permanent solution if you want to. But I think that's the route I would go. There now it's talking about the larger solutions, right? So all the ones we just mentioned are relatively on the lower end as far as price point. They mention the drain tiles.
Mhm.
That is like the absolute most expensive option. There's other routes. The route that I would suggest in this instance, without seeing it, I think either a trench drain or a swell are better options. I
Mhm.
don't know if a swell is going to work in your neck of the woods over in Milwaukee. And I think you almost always got to get a permit for a swell, and you got to get permission from your neighbors.
Yeah.
But if your neighbors probably have an older house too, and I would suggest I would wonder that most people have problems with their basements
Mhm.
if they're older homes, right?
Yeah. And for anybody not, who doesn't know what a swell is, it's kind of like a dry creek bed that you create to take the runoff away from your house. Um
It's kind of like like where gutters are supposed to like redirect the water. It's
mhm.
kind of like turning the ground into a gutter,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a slope that kind of like traps the water in there, and then you usually line the bottom with rocks or something like that. That's going to basically filter out the water system too.
Mhm.
It's great for filtering out the system, right? And then you just redirect it in a way you want it
Yeah.
to.
And I mean ours like
Usually you direct it into like a pond
yeah.
or some type of wetland, but you don't need to. You could direct this into, some type of like street water system or something too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, usually they go downhill, so you want to find like the natural slope of your yard and direct it downhill in a way that is away from your house. And like our swell is even it doesn't have any rocks or anything. It's just a very sloped. We have like a very sloped yard.
oh really?
Mhm. Yeah, and it runs like Mercury had said like it runs through our neighbors as well. So it runs through the backyard of all of our neighbors, and then down the hill to the street.
Yeah, I think a swell is my favorite option because of the naturalness of it. But also, like, swells are just like they're prettier looking. They
Mhm.
look more natural in the landscape. I think they kind of like give a natural barrier between you and your neighbors. I just
Mhm.
think they're like a generally nicer thing, but they're not always practical, right? So a drain trench would be the next route that I would throw out there. And a drain trench, Maggie also brought up when
The
you,
French drain.
yeah, they're similar. They're
Mhm.
similar, but they're still going to run you between $3,000 to $5,000. And a trench drain is basically you can put it around your house, and the water will then go into that trench drain. It basically acts as the downspout extension, as I was mentioning before.
Mhm.
It's a better, more efficient way of doing it, right? Because that trench drain is a whole bunch of concrete typically that is in the ground. So when the water drops in here and they seeps into the trench, then that drain is directed to a location that you don't want it around your house, right?
Mhm.
I think that is the way I would go. If I was going to spend some money on it, right?
Mhm.
I think you also with all these things you mentioned, you almost always have to get permits for all this because you're dealing with trying to deal with your foundation and dealing with drainage, and those become a city
And
issue.
directing water. When you're directing water away from your home, you do have to, yeah, get
Yeah,
the city involved because they have to make sure it's going to the right place so it
th-
doesn't cause a flood for
that's
somebody else.
that's why I think the rain barrel is an interesting concept because you're not redirecting the water necessarily.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like you're dealing with it, but I would say that all those things would be where I would start. I would start with the things that are less permanent and the things that are a little bit more inexpensive, and then see what works for me and what reduces the amount of water in my basement. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I think the thing that we need to look at this is what can we do? What are little solutions that can give me some relief? And they don't have to solve the problem, but they might be able to show you,
Right.
oh, wow, you mean that downspout extension actually reduced the amount of water? Well,
Yeah.
I wonder if a trench drain would do it even more. Then you can
Mhm.
invest $3,000 or $4,000, right?
Yeah.
Because you have a concept that, oh, I would also say start monitoring how much water piles up in your basement. Like start like thinking about how much water really goes in there. Like
Mhm.
try to keep track of it. If you have one spot of your basement that really gets high, use a ruler. We used to do that back on the farm and see how bad it would get, and then you could
Mm.
adjust your sub pump or get a better sub pump and see if it works or not.
Right.
And then if it doesn't work, fuck it. This is not going to be a solution that you want to spend more money on. You
Mhm.
know, so that's a way to go. You could even do a dry well, but I don't think if you're in the city of Milwaukee, you want to do a dry well. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about
Mm-mm.
out there, but a dry well is essentially a deep fucking hole that is about, I don't know, 10, 20 feet away from your house.
Oh, just to
And
like catch all the water.
yeah, exactly. And you can typically when you make a dry well, sorry, you have like a slope that you're inventing when you're
Mhm.
doing it. That would be the route that I would go if I was living on a farm. And then you just have this big ass gaping hole. And then you just put a lid on it, and then you call it a day. We had wells everywhere when we were
Oh,
on the
wow.
farm. But yeah, because you have seepage issues
Yeah.
everywhere on a farm. You know what I mean? Like, especially because we were on a hill. Our house was
Yeah.
built into a hill. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So there was no way that we didn't have constant flooding issues.
Hmm.
So we would have water being piled up everywhere. Water
Mhm.
was pulled while it was piled up. What the fuck am I trying to say?
Piled, yeah.
Piled, yeah. Water was piled up. Pooled. Oh my gosh,
Pooled. Oh,
water
okay.
was pooled up everywhere around the house. So you would want to have some natural ways to prevent that
Mhm.
from getting worse. But dry wells can lead to more damage in your basement. So typically, from what I understand about them, they have to be deeper than the foundation itself.
Mm.
So it all depends. I think like 5 feet is typical, but sometimes they're deep as like 20 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of digging.
That's a lot of digging. I don't know why I became a country western star all of a sudden. Okay. I think we answered it. I think we're 3 for 3 for the day.
Oh, yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Let's go for number 4.
Okay. Hey, Mercury. My name is Kai, and I was wondering, do you know any affordable ways to make a home more disability friendly? I'm disabled and moving into a new house, so I was hoping you might have some suggestions for people like me.
This is such a good question, and I'm really happy that you asked it. Now, I will say it right out of the gate. I'm going to talk specifically about several disabilities, but when we're
Mhm.
talking about these subjects, right, we need to be mindful that this is not one size fit all kind
Yeah.
of situation, right? Like people that have different disabilities, it's very much an umbrella term, right? Because it could
Mhm.
be people like my spouse ZZ, right, has EDS, and sometimes they're immobile, sometimes they need help
Yeah.
in a wheelchair, sometimes they don't, sometimes they are mobile, but they have severe pain sometimes too. So like making a space disability accessible, or making it accessible for people who have disabilities, is not necessarily uniformed,
Right.
right? So be mindful that you're asking this question, but I don't know what your specific limitations are,
Right.
right? And what the things that you're having issues with. So I'm going to try my best to answer this in as many different ways as possible, but I'm probably going to miss it because I'm an able bodied person and I am doing the best I can to be an ally to people who are going through this, but I might miss it, okay? So I'm just going to go through some things that we kind of figured out before we came on the podcast here. So the first thing I'm going to say is when we're talking about accessibility, the first thing that comes to mind is typically wheelchairs and making it wheelchair accessible. It doesn't always have to be that for people who are disabled, but largely making a space not accessible only with stairs is just a good idea for everybody, right?
Mhm.
So eliminating the front steps, if there are front steps, is something that I would think very strongly about, or modifying it. So this is like adding a ramp if it's possible. And they make these ramps that are fairly accessible with price
Mm.
that can be added to your home. And they even make them off of Amazon, actually. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, they do. So you could go that route. And some places are even telling me to tell you all like to install the lifts,
Mm-hmm.
but that is almost always price prohibitive.
Yeah.
That's much harder. But you can, we'll talk later on about it, but you can get grants to
Mm.
make your house accessible. And we'll talk about what grants you can get that will help you in just a few seconds here. So another thing we want to think about is how to make your doorways more
Mhm.
accessible for wheelchairs too. If we're talking about wheelchairs themselves, I would say 36 inches in a doorway would be accessible for most wheelchairs. Making your hallway less narrow, if you have a narrow hallway, those kind of things are really important. Also, the most important if you have a wheelchair or any type of mobility issue is making sure that you don't have slippery floors or
Mhm.
floors that are going to snag on things.
Or
Having
really high
Yeah,
thresholds.
I think I've read before that vinyl flooring is ideal for most wheelchairs
Mm.
and most accessibility issues. So I
Mhm.
think a vinyl floor is actually also pretty affordable.
Yeah.
Typically,
Yeah.
like vinyl flooring is kind of the most affordable to redo your whole floor.
Mhm.
So I would say that's something you want to think about. Making sure that your bathroom is on the first floor. Having a second floor bathroom might not be the
Yeah.
best idea for people if that's the only bathroom in your house. So making sure, or if your bathroom is in the basement, so make sure that there is a bathroom on the first floor. I would hope there is. And then another thing that I would throw out there is making sure that you take the doorknobs off of your doors and you make them handles or push,
Yeah.
right? Because doorknobs can be really hard for people who have dexterity issues.
Mhm.
And even for me, I have really bad carpal tunnel sometimes, and it can be really hard for me to turn stuff.
Yeah.
If I get sharp pains in my wrist. So we have handles everywhere in our shop, but if you have knobs, a
Mhm.
doorknob could be more of inaccessibility than a handle. So think about that. You could also put push plate too on it, but that's a whole different hinge and everything as well. Maggie, feel free to add anything if you got it.
I think you're doing a great job.
I'm killing the game, you would say. Oh, this is another huge one. Make sure you have adequate lighting. The
Mm,
right, like,
yeah,
uh,
that's true.
making sure that you have nice, bright lighting throughout your house that you can actually see things is usually really important. And again, different accessibility is going to require different things, but lighting tends to be a very overlooked one,
Mm-hmm.
and this is going to prevent a whole bunch of different things and help to prevent like as someone who is very neurodivergent, it's just going to make my mood better when things are brighter.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also going to prevent like things that are in a shadow. You might bump into something. It could help with eyesight issues if you're having sight issues and those things around the lines. I would also say removing rugs, making sure there's not rugs everywhere. Loose rugs can become an issue and
Mm-hmm.
prevent mobility. And then last but not least, making sure that your countertops are lower, that your appliances are accessible lower if necessary. Again, this is if you're in a wheelchair, right? If you're not, making sure that they're accessible with whatever mobility device you have, right? Like if you have cabinets that are like the grab knob kind.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the same thing as your door. Maybe having hooks or something on your cabinet door would be good too. So thinking about those kind of things is really important. And everything I've mentioned except the ramp, fairly affordable, right? The flooring is a little bit more of a higher price point,
Yeah.
but everything else I mentioned for just a couple $100, you can solve a lot of these issues. The doorway being widening is going to be a little bit more of a task, but even that doesn't have to be that expensive. You can do that for a fairly good price, you know? Yeah, I think I handled almost all of this. If we're talking about affordability,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that you want to add handrails and grab bars too,
Yeah.
because they're fairly affordable, but boy, they make
And
things.
also switching out if you can, a bathtub for a shower pan.
Oh, that's a good one too. Having a shower chair. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
ZZ has a shower chair that really
Yep.
makes a world of difference.
Oh yeah.
And when you add the handrails and grab bars, make sure they're on studs. I
Yep.
cannot stress it enough. Make sure they're on studs. Do not rely just on drywall anchors with those. Okay. Anything else I'm missing, Maggie?
I think you really covered it. We actually, the first home that we bought was wheelchair accessible because it was an older woman, and Habitat for Humanity came and made it more wheelchair accessible. And I feel like you kind of, named a lot of the things that we saw in the home when we moved in.
You know, the last thing I will add is smart home technology,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that, like, there's so many things from your thermostat, your lighting, your sound.
And you can get a lot of that really cheap too. Like you don't have to install like it's literally just like a type of bulb that you use. And also like for switches. Oh, this is good. It just reminded me. You can get wireless switches
Oh,
for
yeah.
certain light bulbs. We
Yeah.
use them all over our house.
Yep.
If there's not like an outlet that's on a switch, and you can put the switches down lower then that are more accessible for you.
I love that, Maggie. That's
And
such a
because
good
it's
idea.
it's just like
I love
it's a
those too.
wireless. You can put it wherever you want, and it's
Yep.
just a wireless bulb and with a wireless switch.
We covered a ton today on that. Like this, I feel like we just went over so much, and I hope that I didn't focus too much on wheelchairs because I want to make it very specific. The
Yeah.
only not the only not only the disability is not just wheelchairs and
Right.
mobility, right? It could be so many different types of it. So I think it's really important that we make that known. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
anyone to feel like they're not seen with this. But as far as like making the home more friendly for mobility in general,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I feel like we covered a lot of it. Now, price point and money and
Mm.
needing help. There's organizations that are dedicated to helping make this affordable, okay? You can reach out to the grant fund that is a self-efficiency grant from the modestneeds.org is one, or you can reach out to the individual adaptive equipment grant from the Travis Roy Foundation. Those
Nice.
two are the ones that I found online, and they're the most reputable. And both of them do not have any. I do not think they have any income requirement, so or age requirement. I think all the ones I found were age requirement, where you had to be
Oh,
above
sure.
62 and only making $20,000 a year or
Wow.
less. And those are pretty high thresholds for some people.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are in that category, like if you are someone who's 62 and you don't make much every year, then you can look into the Rural Housing Repair Loans and Grants Program. That is specifically for people who are 62 and above and make less than $20,000 a year. So I hope that'll help you. I think this is the most thorough I've answered a question in fucking forever. But I just felt like that was a really important
Yeah.
question that we never covered on this podcast.
Yeah, it was definitely a first here.
Yeah, and also I always feel like, and I want to let you know, I looked up multiple websites. Like
Mhm.
we looked up so many different ones, but this is the one that I looked up the most. It's called rockethomes.com. They wrote an article called A Guide to Home Maintenance for Accessibility. And
Nice.
I got to tell you, this is such a thorough article, but I probably read like 5 or 6. And that
Mhm.
was the one that made the most sense to me. The one that had the easiest layout and everything too.
Cool.
So yeah, I hope that worked out. I hope that was good. Oh, last thing. I said all of this and I didn't say one of the most important things for me. I am, for those who don't know, I am very hard of hearing on my left ear. I don't know. I have like 10-15% of like my hearing left on my left side. So I am learning ASL and I'm also trying to make our current home accessible for, home stuff, right? So we have our doorbell is linked to lights
Nice.
when you walk in, right? And those kind of things are important too. Like using light to alert people, if that's an accessibility, is important. Light switches that have different colors and things like that can help. Anything that can get your attention visually rather than just from noise. As someone who, at the end of the day, because Maggie's looking at me right now, I have my left ear is exposed,
Yeah.
but my right ear is completely covered. I take a lot of heat from my right ear. Like my right ear is constantly handling all the workload that both my ears should. So by the end of the day, I don't typically like have my hearing gets worse by the end of the day, right? So the end of the day can be very hard if there's multiple noise happening for me to be able to pick up on where the noise is coming from.
Yeah.
And if I'm having TV in the background and someone's talking to me, I can't always hear what the person is saying. So yeah. Anyways, I hope we covered all that. I hope we did a good job. Maggie, did you do a good job?
You did a great job.
I did a real good job. Next question.
Hi there, Mercury, fellow trans person and fan here. I have a question for your podcast today. How do you strike a balance between staying informed about all the increasing systemic harm impacting our community without feeling too overwhelmed or anxious all of the time? How do you practice self-care and soothing?
What a great question. And I'm going to be honest right now. I don't know if I'm always good at this. Maggie sees me almost more than anybody in the way of like how vulnerable I am and how much pressure I put on myself.
Yeah.
I think that I love this question and thank you for sharing like this with us and asking this question. But I think for me as a trans person who is very visible, I think sometimes I beat myself up about not doing enough or not making sure that voices are elevated that should be elevated. I feel like I lose sleep over this sometimes. I often talk about this, but I lucked into this platform. Yes, a lot of this came from my hard work. This is true. I don't want to demean the hard work that I put into this and my friends put into this and Maggie's put into this. But it wasn't by design. It was like one viral video changed my life forever and then I just kept running with it. And I often don't feel like I have the ability or the skill set to handle all the expectations and pressure that's put on me. And sometimes I'm asked these really heavy questions like, what do you think about the Kentucky bill? What do you think about the Tennessee bill? What do you think about such and such who was killed in this city? And it's so heavy for me to think about all the time, right? So how do I balance all of it? How do I try to find peace within all of this trans suffering right now? I try to focus on the community that I can help. I try to focus on the support system that I've built over the years. And I try to make sure that I do things that bring me joy. one of those things that bring me joy is I love going to see movies alone. I don't think Maggie, do you know that about me?
No.
No. I go to movies alone pretty much constantly.
Really?
Yeah. I love going to see movies alone. In like for Creed 3, when Creed 3 came out just a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
I went to that movie alone. It was like I
Nice.
took myself out. I call it date night, Mercury date night, solo date night. And I try to do things like that to keep my peace
Mm-hmm.
and make me feel normal in the sea of abnormality, right? Like it's not normal to have the world crashing down on you,
Yeah.
and it's not normal for trans people to be in the spotlight. It just isn't. I remember a time when I was younger when we didn't even have terms for trans people. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
The only terms we have are largely, derogatory, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't really have a term until 1996, and that was transgender. Before that, it was a lot of terms were thrown at us. A lot of them were derogatory, but they were like sissy, the F slur, the T slur, transsexuality, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But all of these terms were thrusted on us.
Mm-hmm.
The only term I think that we've embraced has been transgender. It's one of the only terms we have universally, largely embraced.
Yeah.
But that's recent history. That's 1996. That's younger than I am. And I think when we talk about these subjects, it's so easy to lose the sight of the fact that so many people kept us a secret
Yeah.
that we weren't spoken about. So we're learning in real time how to handle the pressures about being the center of the LGBTQ community instead of the unspoken workforce.
Yeah.
The trans community for years was ahead of the front lines when it came to activism. And now we're not just in the front lines. We are in the front lines, but we're fuel for the hate machine.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's really hard to handle. And psychologically, I don't think any of us can comprehend all that's happening. As we're listening to it right now, I think something like 385 anti-trans bills have been introduced into local and national legislation. And the list just keeps going up higher and higher. And every week, every day, there's a new bill that adds to it. So to answer the question about how do I keep my peace, how do I keep my center of gravity, is I focus on what I can control and how I can help people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's largely the $1 million fundraiser. I said this in an interview earlier this week, but for me, focusing on $1 million fundraiser is a way that I can keep my sanity because I'm able to raise money for our community in response to the hate. That hate is generating so much support for what we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? The more they hate us, the more people want to reach out, the more allies want to step up. And we're using that energy to raise money to help 11,000 trans people access gender affirming care who would not be able to otherwise. So, as I do on the internet, when I get a hate comment, I favor it and I keep it in my file. So when I need to have fuel for my views on TikTok, I use their hate to educate.
Yeah.
And I use their hate to fuel views, which then in turn fuels knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's been my same response to the $1 million fundraiser. The more they hate us, the more help we can give. And they're not doing what they think they're doing. And that's the only way that I can totally handle that. And also, I pet a lot of cats. I hang out with my spouse. I find the love that I have in the world, and I hold on to it with my dear heart.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing we can do. And also be mindful. There is no right way to handle all of this right now. Like I just feel like, just don't lash out on others. Try to regulate your emotions as much as possible, and do what you can to ground yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And just know you're not alone. That every trans person I've spoken to in the last 3 or 4 weeks, all of us are exaggerated. All of us are exhausted by it, rather. And all of us are absolutely overwhelmed by it. But finding the trans joy and putting that in the forefront is kind of the solution I think we need to focus on a lot. Yes, marches are good. Yes, supporting trans laws, like trans support laws. All those things are really good. But also finding our joy in the midst of all of this pain is what can lead to trans youth feeling like it's safe to come out. Because in the midst of all of this, a lot of trans youth are afraid. And they are afraid, but we need to make sure they know that we're not going anywhere, that we're fighting for them. The trans youth should not be fighting for us.
Right.
We need to be standing up and protecting them. So I hope that all makes sense. I hope that was a good enough answer. Such a hard one to answer in so many different ways.
Yeah. And
But
can I speak to the allies for a moment?
oh my God, go right ahead, Maggie.
Yeah, I mean, just, as somebody who's business partners with Mercury and, I just want to say to allies that this is also our chance to stand up and to support our trans friends because, they're going through so much right now, as as Mercury just spoke about. And so we really need to be willing to give a lot of grace and to show up for them and to be there for them because, not only are they the subject of all of the hate right now, but they're just the punching bag that's being that they're using, the people are using right now, and they're gonna come for other people as well. And so standing up for our trans community is going to stand up for everybody else, and it's going to help everybody else. And so I really want to call on the allies to show up for your trans friends and family right now because it's not some far off, thing. It's something that's happening to them. And there are ways that we can show up for them and support them. And I just encourage you to reach out to your trans friends and family and make sure that they're okay. And again, a lot of grace right now.
Maggie, I love you. Thank you for being like the queen of all the allies. I really,
you too.
I don't know what I would do without you. That all being said, I want to end this on a high note, and I just want to say we're already at like probably 200,000 by the time you're listening to this. And I know that it's sometimes every day is really hard, but think about what we can do. Like the trans community is so good at mutual aid, and that keeps me going. It really does. And I get so much hate on the internet, but I think I spend more time laughing than I do crying. And we find ways to be silly. We find ways to make each other laugh. And I try to not be alone. I try my best to be surrounded by people who support me and don't question my existence. And I think that's hard. I think that it's a privilege to be able to not be around people who question your existence as a trans person.
Yeah.
Like if you have a job that's blue collar, it's just by the very nature, it can be hard to even be out. So if you're listening to this and you're trans and you feel alone, just know I understand and I love you and I hope that you're in an okay place. Okay. Everybody, I hope that you are having a good day. I hope you are hanging in there. I hope that you are petting a cat, maybe eating a strawberry, and goddamn it, cucumbers. Cucumbers with salt. Oh my God. Maggie introduced me.
Mini cucumbers with pink salt.
Oh my God. Maggie introduced me to this just today, and I have been obsessed with cucumbers now. A great after-school snack. But that all being said, I hope you are having a good day. I hope that you are loved and appreciated. And as always, remember, you're worth the time it takes to learn a new skill. Bye-bye. The theme song for the Handyman Hotline was written by Rhodey Walker. The questions were picked out by our production assistants, Ray and Basil. And the sound was engineered by Matthew Allen Hagg. Thank you for listening. See you next time. This episode is sponsored by our friend Snugplug. You know I don't do many sponsorships, so when I do, you know that I believe in the product. We all face outlets sometimes that have loose connection. They just fall out. When you're doing your vacuuming or you're trying to charge your phone, it just falls right out of the wall. Well, now with Snugplug, you don't need to worry about that anymore. You just insert that and it'll be nice and snug. A wonderful invention that I think you should get as well. And you can support us here at the podcast by going to the affiliate link and getting yourself a Snugplug. If you enjoyed this episode of the Handyman Hotline, you can listen to an even longer version by supporting us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon, $10 or more, you'll be able to get an extra long 30 to 45 minute section every single week. Isn't that amazing? More of me and Maggie. Wow! So thank you so much for all those who already support us, and you too can support us and listen to more on our Patreon. Thank you. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us keep the pirate ship alive by supporting our sponsors, the wonderful iFixit. They fight for your right to repair and makes really cool tools in the process. If you need to fix your phone, laptop, or even a vacuum, iFixit has thousands of parts, tools, and free guides to make your life a little bit easier.
So grab your hammer and nails and paint your nails if you want to.